Kia ora, good evening. Southland's Regional Land Transport Plan is due to be released for public consultation next week, but this time it'll be a joint venture. The Southland and Otago Regional Land Transport Committees have combined to put both regions' draft plans together. We caught up with Environment Southland Chair Ali Timms to find out why the joint venture and what Southland can expect.
It's an initiative that came from discussions that we had with Otago Regional Council about 18 months ago on how we can work together more effectively, and we thought there is now an opportunity with a change in the legislation for both of us to work on our plans in a combined way. We felt that it was a good initiative because they're our neighbouring region and we have a lot in common, a lot of road linkages, and I think it's proved to be a really successful initiative.
Will it help towards making sure there's consistency in what projects are being done at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. There's one combined project in particular, and that's, I think it's called the Southern Penguin Highway, and that's going to provide for some sealing on some roads down there to Nugget Point and also the Curio Bay Haldane Road. So that'll provide a direct inter-regional link, and it'll provide for some real safety because it's it's an area that's used by lots of tourists, so having it sealed will be a good safety outcome.
What are some of the other projects outlined in the draft plan?
Okay, so there's lots going on. I guess what interested me in the process is that we saw the real links between Otago and Southland. So what happens on Otago roads affects our roads. So some flooding mitigation work up in North Otago affects us because if trucks can't get through, then we can't get our produce either way and so on. Plenty of other projects going. We're going to replace the Pyramid Bridge, and that's quite a strong link between Northern Southland and West Otago. There's going to be some realignment done finally at Edendale to bypass the factory, so it'll take that State Highway 1 out of the township, and that's been a big safety factor, particularly given that the railway goes through there as well.
So this will give Southland residents a say in certain projects outside their region?
Absolutely. We've had the chance to directly influence what Otago are doing in their region. Some of the work that's been happening around the Frankton Flats, there's so many people that travel from Southland through to Otago to their cribs or holiday homes or for work or to go overseas and so on. So it's been really good to have an influence over their programs via the combined meetings and the combined plans.
Are you expecting quite a few submissions?
I've got no idea. I think last time, 3 years ago, when we did the Southland one, we were proposing some bypasses up at Thompson Crossing, and it was very contentious, so we had a lot of submissions around that one issue. That's now been taken out of the plan, so I'm not too sure. But I don't think we'll have a huge number of submissions, but we have set aside 3 days for hearings.
An iconic Invercargill landmark has passed a detailed examination to see how it would perform in an earthquake with flying colours. The trust that manages Invercargill's first church felt it was irresponsible to continue using the building until its condition was ascertained. Now the church is celebrating its 80% plus rating with free tours to the century-old building next month.
The result for this building was a lot better than we had feared. In fact, it's exceeded expectations, and that was that the building really is better than 80% of new build standard.
That must come as some relief to the trust.
It certainly did. I mean, we've been working on the building now for something like 15 years. When we first became involved, the stained glass windows were in dire need of restoration. And so the golden rule with these big projects is first and foremost to keep the water out. So the first thing we did was to conserve the stained glass windows, and that followed up with major conservation work on the brickwork on the roof, again with the objective of keeping the water out. So that after completing that, we had time to pause, I suppose, and think, where do we go from here? Fairly obviously the interior of the church needs a refurbishment. We didn't want to do that if major structural work was going to be necessary. So the part of the reason for the appraisal was to find out where we're going to have to install major structural strengthening before we restored the plasterwork and that kind of thing. So it was a huge relief to find that we don't have to, and we can now go ahead really with the renovation.
It's a testimony to the original build by the sound of it. It's got over 1 million bricks in it. It's 1 metre deep at the base with the brick walls.
I would agree. What always strikes me as being amazing was that a a Presbyterian congregation way back at the start of the century, which must have been a pretty conservative bunch, really chose a design for such an exuberant building.
It's been described as Italian Romanesque, and after 100 years, you are having some celebrations around this in February.
We are indeed, yes. We're celebrating the laying of the foundation stone in mid-February, and so it'll be a big coming together of people who've been involved in the church over the last 100 years, or those who are still alive anyway. And yes, to mark that occasion, we'll be launching fundraising and a project to reinstate the interior of the church. I think it's worth noting that one of the inspired things about the church is that, as you can hear, the acoustics are wonderful. So as a performing venue, it is superb. And that really is in constant demand for recitals, music recitals, performing arts, that kind of thing. And so its future is, as a church, and as I think the city needs these big ceremonial spaces for things like Christmas Eve services and funerals, large funerals, that kind of thing. So we need these big spaces in the city, but also as a very suitable venue for performing arts.
Stay with us after the break. Prime Minister John Key announces a state housing shake-up, and Queenstown proves it's the place to be this summer. Welcome back. In today's State of the Nation address, Prime Minister John Key laid out government's state housing stock shake-up plan. Between 1,000 and 2,000 state houses will be sold in the next year, with an extra $40 million per year funding social housing. Housing New Zealand would remain the country's biggest social landlord, with at least 60,000 properties by 2017. This will follow a review of Housing New Zealand's role. Key said the properties could be sold at book value, as the transaction wouldn't be on the open market. Capital freed up from the sales would be used for housing and other capital projects needed across government. The government's focusing heavily on the collection of tax debt has paid off, according to MP Todd McClay. The Minister of Revenue was in Invercargill today, and we caught up with him to talk about a big change in the way we pay tax and to find out if Southlanders have been paying theirs.
We collect $55 billion worth of tax every year, but there will always be occasions where people are a bit late in paying or find it difficult to pay. We've given Inland Revenue additional resource to focus on this, and first and foremost we're keen to engage with individuals or businesses in the early stages to try and work out arrangements or help them with paying their tax. But ultimately we owe it to all taxpayers to make sure that everyone that owes tax pays it, and so there's an element of enforcement around this as well.
And where does Southland fare in regards to regional tax debt?
I don't have the exact figures, but from memory, fairly well. During a time of recession, there's always going to be challenges for some individuals and some companies. But what we're seeing throughout New Zealand over the last year or two, the short-term debt is reducing. Last year we collected $4.1 billion of overdue tax, and that was an increase of about $730 million on the year before. So that's very good news for the taxpayer, because we get to use this to build schools and make sure the police are doing the job they need to and treat people in hospitals. Ultimately, anybody that's finding it difficult with their tax situation, my advice is to get in touch with Inland Revenue. Where possible, they'll always try and work out an arrangement or work with people, and sometimes there can be concern around this, but if they get in touch, Inland Revenue have been asked to work closely with individuals to try and do whatever they can.
And I understand that to make the process easier, they're undergoing some changes?
Well, that's right. So we're changing changing the way Inland Revenue does its business. It's called business transformation. Two parts of this. We're going to create a new state-of-the-art computer system, but more than that, we're going to modernise and simplify the tax system. We want people to spend less time thinking about tax and spend less time on tax administration, more time running their businesses and investing in their local economy. So our view is that if we can relieve a little bit of this red tape upon local companies in New Zealand, actually everybody will be better off.
So what will be changing specifically?
Well, lots of things. Over the next year, we're going to look closely at the GST system and the PAYE system to find ways to simplify this for people so they can understand it better and can rely upon it a lot more. We're also going to look at provisional tax and look for ways to make this fairer to companies, to make it a bit more realistic, so they only pay tax based upon what they're earning and the profits they're making, not necessarily on what happened the previous year. and I'm very keen for Inland Revenue to have a look at the secondary tax system. For some New Zealanders, it's less fair than it should be, and we really want to line these systems up so people only pay the tax that they should, that they're not overpaying tax, and where they might have paid too much, they can get it back quickly. The main drive or motivation of business transformation is to make the tax system better for New Zealanders and to make sure it serves New Zealanders better.
Now is not the time to start slashing interest rates, according to the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research. Despite inflation falling below 1%, NZIER's Shadow Board has recommended the Reserve Bank leaves the official cash rate where it stands at 3.5%. Both NZIER's quarterly survey of business opinion and rocketing house prices in Auckland point to strong economic growth, according to the Institute. But while the majority of the Shadow Board favoured leaving rates on hold, there was a slight shift towards cutting rates back to 3.25%. Dairy prices falling, drought conditions and a slump in the price of oil are all factors leaning toward lower interest rates. The Reserve Bank will announce its decision for the official cash rate tomorrow. Queenstown's proven to be one of the best holiday destinations in the world after recently earning a collection of domestic and international accolades. Queenstown was voted the second most popular destination for Chinese travellers by China's largest online travel agency, Ctrip.com. The awards are based on over 50 million online reviews and 3.6 million votes. The province also took out the top 3 spots in the 2015 TripAdvisor Traveller's Choice Awards for hotels in New Zealand. But it's not just international visitors enjoying what Queenstown has to offer, according to a whatif.com survey. The survey, based on year-on-year accommodation over the summer period, named the province the #1 coastal and lakeside destination for Kiwi travellers. Students at Waianawa's school will be putting their green thumbs into action soon after winning $2,000 in a gardening grant. Rural Women New Zealand and Farmland selected 11 rural schools as prize winners. The project's been running for 4 years with the aim of helping schools develop vegetable gardens and orchards. In the past, schools have used their prize money to build tunnel houses, composting systems, buy seeds, plants, fruit trees and gardening equipment. Cheques will be presented to the schools at the beginning of the new term. And that's it from us tonight. Stay with us for sport along after the weather next. From the news team, good night.